All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the NIH Director's Pioneer Award Q&A webinar. We're glad to have you with us. Um, just some housekeeping items. If you have questions that pop up during the webinar, please use the Q&A box you have. I believe it's on your right-hand side. We'll monitor the chat as best we can, but the Q&A box is a lot easier for us to coordinate. So please submit your questions through there. For those of you who submitted questions via email before this webinar, then we will be sure to get to those as well. We ask that you withhold and asking very specific scientific inquiries. So these are questions like, I have this great research idea. What do you think? This is not the place for that. Instead, I ask you to email us at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov, and we would be happy to talk to you in more depth about that. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website along with a copy of the slides. We will post them as soon as we can after we make them fully compliant and accessible. But you can go to our website at commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer to get a hold of the recording and the slides. So this is just what I told you. So please use that Q&A box. And we also have more information on our website that we have an application and award guide that really walks you through how to put together an application as well as example applications. So please feel free to look at our website for those tools. And now I will turn this over to Ravi.
Thank you very much, Becky, and thanks to all who are attending this webinar today. And thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm Ravi Basavappa. I'm the program leader of the High Risk, High Reward Research Program, and also the program officer for the Pioneer Awards and the Transformative Research Awards. I'm joined today by Becky Miller, who is the program officer for the Early Independence Awards, Trish Lebowski, who's program officer for the New Innovator Awards, but also associated with a number of other programs in the Common Fund. James Mack, I hope we'll be joined by him. He's the Scientific Review Officer who oversees the review of the Pioneer Award applications. And of course, Ellie Murcia in the Common Fund office, who helps to make sure that we keep on track with all the mechanics of the Pioneer Award and the HR program in general. Okay, next slide, please. So the High Risk, High Reward Research Program is housed in the Common Fund office, the Office of Strategic Coordination in the Office of the Director. It's one of about 26 or so different programs. So if you're not familiar with the Common Fund, I would encourage you to go to the Common Fund website, commonfund.nih.gov. And there you'll find links to the different programs. Next slide, please. Okay, that's fine. So there may be programs there that are relevant to your research area. They may have reagents or resources that are relevant to what you're doing and help you to perform your research, or they may have FOAs that are pertinent to you and you may wish to apply for funding through those other Common Fund programs. The next slide, please. Good, but here we're today to talk about the Pioneer Award program, which is one of the 4 initiatives within the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. Next slide, please. So as I said, the Pioneer Award is one of 4 initiatives in the the High Risk, High Reward Research Program, not to be confused with the High Risk Human Resources Program. This is High Risk, High Reward Research Program. The intent of the HRHR program is to support outstanding scientists at all career stages who propose high risk, potentially high impact research. Next slide, please. Oh, and I should say, so the Pioneer Award is one of them. The other 3 initiatives are the New Innovator Award, which is focused on early career stage investigators, the Transformative Research Award, which is also supports high risk, high reward research, but allows single PIs as well as multiple PIs and allows flexible budgets. And finally, the Early Independence Award, which is also known as the Skip the Postdoc Award because it helps people who are just about to launch their careers after finishing their PhD or clinical training do so by foregoing the typical postdoctoral training period. Next slide, please. But all of these 4 initiatives seek to support high risk, really high impact ideas. Next slide. And all of these 4 initiatives also do not require preliminary data or a detailed experimental plan. And this is really true. We try to educate the reviewers not to expect details, substantial experimental details, or a lot of supporting data. So most people do provide some data. We'll get into that a bit more, but no data really required. If data are provided, they will be evaluated. And if you provide too much data, that can actually be counterproductive because then everything will seem very feasible and so not aligned with the intention of the high risk, high reward research program. Next slide, please. Any topic that's relevant to the broad mission of NIH is welcome. Behavioral, social, biomedical, applied, formal sciences, and anything along the basic to the bench to bedside pathway, basic translational or clinical research is welcome. We really do try to diversify the scientific portfolio of the HRHR program. So if you notice that your particular research area is not supported yet, don't take that as a sign of discouragement or disincentive to apply. That actually might be positive because we do seek to broaden the areas of science that we support. Next slide, please. We do encourage applications from investigators with diverse backgrounds and from the full spectrum of eligible institutions. So institutions that may not be so research intensive or may not have a track record of supporting huge amounts of research, but still, very strong investigators with really cool ideas can come from anywhere in the nation. So we really seek to tap into the nation's potential for exceptionally innovative research. Next slide, please. The HRHR program is quite complex. It has many moving parts. And to make sure that the parts move accordingly and the transmission goes smoothly, we do have a large working group, the HRHR working group, with representation from almost all the institutes and centers at NIH. They serve as liaisons between the Common Fund HRHR program and their own respective institutes or centers. And they also help to implement the program in terms of setting the parameters of the program and issue the FOAs and so forth. Next slide, please. So a bit more about the Pioneer Award program, which is the focus of today's webinar. The Pioneer Award seeks to support individual scientists who have outstanding records of doing really cool stuff in the past. But going forward, they proposed something that's quite bold, something that would address a major challenge in biomedical or behavioral research, or really seek to exploit an emerging opportunity. It was started in 2004, so it's the original HRHR program. It's open to people at all career stages, people who are beginning assistant professors to people who are National Academy of Science members. We've had awardees at both ends of the career spectrum. Typically, though, it's those who are relatively established investigators who apply and receive the award, those who are associate professor or more senior, but it's open to people at all career stages. It's called the Pioneer Award, and that is because what's being proposed must represent a new research direction for the PI. It shouldn't be a natural extension of what he or she has been doing. It shouldn't be a scale up of ongoing efforts. It shouldn't be the next logical steps. It should really be a pivot in the direction and should be a leap for the investigator and for the field. It's unusual in that it requires 3 letters of reference. We'll talk a bit more about that. Another unusual feature is that the PI must commit to at least 51% research effort to the Pioneer Award project in the first 3 years. In the subsequent years, in years 4 and 5, the awardee is allowed to ramp down effort to help transition to other sources of support. But the idea is that the Pioneer Award must represent a major research effort in the awardee's laboratory. The awards are $700,000 in direct cost per year for 5 years, so it's a large award. People can go after pretty ambitious ideas. And it uses what's called an activity code of the DP1. It's not the R01, but DP1, the Director's Pioneer Award. Next slide, please. So when the Pioneer Award was created, it was intended to be very different from the standard R01 in all major aspects, from application to review to administration. So for example, in the Pioneer Award application, compared to the R01, a specific aims page is required for the R01, but there is no specific aims page for the Pioneer Award application for the DP1. The research strategy section is 12 pages now, including plenty of space for a detailed experimental plan and preliminary data. When the program was started, in 2004, the research strategy section, as some of you might recall, was actually 25 pages. So the difference between the Pioneer Award and the R01 was even more stark, because for the Pioneer Award, the major application component is a 3 to 5 page essay. It's pretty much a vision statement for the PI and how he or she hopes to have the maximum impact through the award. For the R01, we request biosketches from the PI as well as for all other senior key personnel. For the DP1, it's for the biosketches allowed only for the PI, because this is very much focused on the qualities of the principal investigator. In many respects, this may consider to be a person-based award rather than a project-based award, such as the R01. A bibliography and citation component is required for the R01 application, but for the DP1, we do not allow a separate bibliography or citation component. Rather, we ask the individuals, the investigators, to include the essential references in the essay. For the R01, details are required, especially if the budget is non-modular, if it exceeds more than $250,000, and we do require plenty of details in the budget. But for the DP1, there's no detailed budget requested, or will budget details be accepted. All we ask is for the PIs to say, hey, I want $3.5 million in direct costs, which would be spent at $700,000 per year for 5 years, but we don't ask for any details beyond that, just $3.5 million. For the R01, the letters of support are encouraged when appropriate. For the DP1, letters of support or collaboration are not allowed, again, because the focus is on the principal investigator. For the R01, the research effort really depends on the project. But for the DP1, as I mentioned earlier, at least 51% research effort for the first 3 years. I should say that here research effort is effort only toward research. It doesn't include in the calculation effort towards administrative duties, clinical duties, or teaching duties, just research. For the R01, letters of reference are not allowed, but for the DP1, we require 3, exactly 3, not 2, not 4, but 3 letters are required. Next slide, please. A point of some confusion when people, prospective applicants, read the FOA is that whether or not they should fill out all the other components of the application. The answer to that is yes, unless specifically directed in the FOA, follow the instructions in the SF 424 application guide. This means that if you're using human subjects or animal subjects, then you should complete the appropriate sections. You should also complete the authentication of key biological or chemical resources, biohazards, if that's appropriate to what you're doing. We're not allowed to say that you should go into details about things that are already given in the SF 424 application. Just keep in mind that if there are no instructions that deviate from the SF 424, then you should complete according to the SF 424 application guide. And although we do ask you to complete, for example, the vertebrate animal section or human subject section, which do require some details and seems to be in principle antithetical to the intention of the Pioneer Award program, we ask you, yes, to fill out these sections as best as you can. We train or educate the reviewers to not expect the same level of detail that they might expect in a standard R01 application. Next slide, please. So in the 5-page essay, it's a structured essay. It's not free-flowing. So we do ask you to address the following items. First is a project science area, and there's more information about that in the FOA. We don't need to go into detail here, I think, about that unless there's specific questions. The project title, descriptive title of proposed project. Please don't say Pioneer Award application. We've seen that a few times, but do use a title, maybe a little bit whimsical, but really does describe the topic of what's being proposed. We also ask you to provide a project description. In this subsection, then describe why what you're proposing really is scientifically important. What is the significance of what you're proposing? Overall, what is the approach that you plan to take? Again, no experimental details. You only have 5 pages. Preliminary data are not required. Many people, or most people, do provide some data, and that's to give a glimmer of hope that whatever is being proposed can actually be achieved. But again, if you provide too much data, that can be counterproductive. You also are required to state that and we ask you to state in your essay that you're not providing a detailed experimental plan and that extensive data are not being provided. And that is to remind the reviewers that, hey, this is not an R01 application. So if they're reading the essay and they're stated boldly, per the FOA, I'm not providing a detailed experimental plan, nor am I providing substantial supporting data, that helps to keep the reviewers on track, we think, and help them from slipping into the R01 mindset and start looking for those details and data. However, although we say no details, no data, and that's true, we also need to balance that with that you should be fairly concrete in what you're writing. You should be clear about what it is you're proposing, why it's important, what would the deliverables be by the end of the 5-year project period. So the reviewers need to have a clear sense of what you're planning to do, and that you have deeply considered the project. For example, that you've thought about what you think are the major risky elements, that you've thought of alternate approaches to mitigate those risks, that you will overall pursue the research in a very robust, rigorous, and reproducible manner. For example, for rigor and robustness, that you will, if you're using vertebrate animals or humans, that you will use sex as a biological variable unless you have a good reason not to. That you will, if you're using such subjects, that you have thought about the numbers of subjects you'll need, that you've done some sort of power analysis to buttress the claim for the numbers of subjects that you will need. Again, this is all taken with with the intention of, yes, you have thought about the project, but you may not have worked out the details. So these are your best guesses, and that's how we try to educate remind the reviewers as well, that these are your best guesses as how you're going to proceed with the project. In the essay, you're also asked to address explicitly your record of innovation, what you've done in the past that you consider to be exceptionally innovative, how you've overcome substantial technical conceptual hurdles in the past, been able to challenge paradigms, bring together unusual teams of people to really push forward science in a new and a compelling direction. And here we ask you to repeat that sort of record that you've had to change in research direction. Explain how the proposed project is a change in research direction. It's not along the same trajectory of what you've been doing. We also ask you to address explicitly the suitability for the Pioneer Award program. Why what you're proposing is really high risk, high reward, rather than traditional research that tends to be supported by NIH. We ask you to state again, state here that you will commit at least 51% research effort toward the Pioneer Award project. And if you do have substantial other funding, and you already exceed 50, and if your present level of funding would prevent you from committing 51% research effort, then you have to provide a compelling plan of how you would change your effort on those other projects such that you could really genuinely commit 51% research effort toward the Pioneer Award project. Again, bibliography and citations not required, but we encourage you to include what you think are the critical citations. And again, they must be in the 5-page essay. These citations may be in abbreviated form. For example, you can just provide the PMIDs if you wish. Just need to make sure that the identifier is unique and findable. Next slide, please. So in the research strategy essay, some points to consider. Given the review process, and I hope that Dr. Mack will be able to describe the review process, be sure that what you write can be easily appreciated by people who are well outside the field for exceptional innovation and potential for unusually broad impact. People who are not in the field will be taking a look at your application, and they must be able to grasp pretty quickly why what you're doing really is so innovative and could have the potential for unusually broad impact. At the same time, it should be compelling to people who know something about the science that you're proposing, and they should be equally convinced about the innovation and potential impact. So in crafting your essay, then it may be helpful to begin with the description of the landscape. What is the state of the art? What are the boundaries? And in that context, then describe what you're proposing and why it would push well past the current boundaries or the current state of the art, and hence why it is so innovative and potentially impactful. And since many of the reviewers will not be experts in the field, we suggest that you ease the reader into the jargon of the field. Don't jump in with throwing in a lot of abbreviations and acronyms. Ease the reader so that person who's not familiar can easily grasp what's happening and what's being proposed and why it's important. Though no data or detailed experimental plan are required, you have to convince the reviewer again that you have thought deeply about the project, as I've just discussed, and convince the reviewer that the research will be performed in a robust and rigorous manner. Next slide, please. James, will you be able to join us?
It doesn't look like it. He says that he has to download something, doesn't have admin rights.
Oh.
So I think Ravi, if you could go through this too, please.
Sure. High risk, high reward indeed. Okay. So I can't emulate the deep voice that James has, so forgive me. Okay, but the Pioneer Award review process is also very different from the standard R01 review process. For the R01s, we have a single panel for this set of applications, and the reviewers are chosen to be topic experts. They actually know something about the science that's being proposed, and they consider the 5 standard review criteria: significance, impact, innovation, approach, investigator, and environment. As well as all the reviewable matters such as human subjects, vertebrate animals, and so forth. And the focus tends to be on approach and feasibility. A few studies have been done now in which people have used, for example, principal component analysis to look at which particular review criteria weigh most heavily in determining the overall priority impact score. And it turns out that it's the approach criterion score that has the biggest impact on determining the overall priority score for the application. For the Pioneer Award, it's a 2-phase review process. There are 2 non-overlapping panels that form the review, that form the set of reviewers for the Pioneer Awards. And an unusual feature is that includes in-person interviews. The reviewers are not assigned by specific topic expertise. And although they are, but instead we ask these reviewers who are not experts in the field to rather use their broad scientific expertise to weigh in on whether what's being proposed really is innovative and potentially very impactful. Although they are required by FACA requirements to consider all 5 standard review criteria, the emphasis or the emphases for the review process in the Pioneer Awards are on innovation and potential impact, the qualities of the investigator, and whether what's being proposed really does represent a change in the research direction. And so rather than being on approach and feasibility for the Pioneer Awards, on the investigator, the impact, and the innovation. So sometimes I say the 3 I's in the Pioneer Award program: the investigator, innovation, and impact. Next slide, please. So to go a bit into the review process then, the applications for this year are due September 9th. So this year means that they're due, the applications are due this year, but the awards will be made next fiscal year, 2023, next calendar year as well. So in phase 1, all the applications that are received in response to the FOA are reviewed by electronic reviewers, mail reviewers, MAIL reviewers. There are 3 electronic reviewers per application. 2 of them are chosen to have expertise in the broad area of what's being proposed. For example, chemical biology, neurobiology, or immunology, or human or behavioral social science research. But it's only broad such as that. The third of the 3 reviewers is somebody chosen to be well outside the field. So, for example, if you're proposing something that has to do with MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, then you might get somebody who's doing like DNA chromatin structure or something like that. So something that's far afield. That's why it's really important, even for the phase 1 review, to write in a manner such that it can be easily appreciated by people who are well outside the field. So the phase 1 reviewers, they provide scores and brief comments. These scores and brief comments are given to a phase 2 panel, the interview panel. The interview panel typically consists of 12 to 15 scientists known for their broad scientific perspective. And informed by the results from the first phase reviews, the interview panel then selects about 25 people or so who in that cohort who they think are the most pioneering, who have the most pioneering applications. And these 25 individuals are then invited for interview in front of the interview panel. So the interview panel has its deliberations, conducts its deliberations in January and March, through March, typically of the year. The interviews are conducted in April, and it's the interview panel that provides the scores from which the overall priority score is provided. So the interview consists typically of a 15-minute presentation by the interviewee, followed by a 15-minute question and answer or discussion between the interviewee and the panel. And then there's about 15-minute closed door discussion of the applicant by the panel. Next slide, please. Yes. So I alluded to this a bit before, but in the FOA, we instruct the applicants to assign their applications to belong to one of these 9 broad science areas. One as a primary, and then a secondary, and the second area has a secondary area. And this helps in the review process so that Dr. Mack can make the assignments appropriately. So, for example, in phase 1, 2 of the reviewer, if the application happens to be in immunology and behavioral social sciences immunology as a primary area and behavioral and social sciences as a secondary area, then 2 of the 3 reviewers in phase 1 will have expertise in those broad areas, but the third person will have expertise domain that's in one of the other 7 areas. Next slide, please. So all the applications will be reviewed in one special emphasis panel. I've discussed this before, so I think this is good. Next slide, please. Yes, and so we asked the phase 1 reviewers to self-assign themselves to these 9 broad areas. One is a primary area and one is a secondary area. And that's how these designations are used then in assigning reviewers in the phase 1 review process. Next slide, please. So the philosophy adopted by the pioneer reviewers, I'll try to channel James for this. So think of yourself as a prospector scouring for exciting nascent ideas. So take and ideas that explore fundamental mechanisms, probing technologies, or enabling methodologies in basic clinical and applied biomedical sciences. So in prospecting, be driven far more by broad recognition of important problems and novel, potentially path-breaking approaches to address them than by the more focused conventional approach that's taken in NIH review. Avoid picking technical nits as long as violations of nature are not proposed. So, often we say violating one law of physics is okay, but maybe not two. Do not, and these are the sort of instructions that James gives to the reviewers to help create the proper mindset when they evaluate Pioneer Award applications. And don't reflexively penalize for riskiness in propositions, especially if the payoff is commensurate. If you're going after something risky, but the reward also would be quite high, then it might be worth pursuing. Read the research plans with the spirit that you would bring to a Scientific American article. So they were written again to be broadly approachable to people in different areas of science. So don't focus on the details why something might not work, but imagine more what happens if something could work. Imagine the possibilities and whether what's being proposed could actually make those possibilities a reality. Next slide, please. So it's the second panel, the interview panel, that gives the overall scores. But we asked the panel to use the 1 to 9 scale, the traditional scale. But for phase 1, we asked them to score the significance and innovation, the investigator, and the suitability for the Pioneer Award. And again, the emphasis will be on the investigator and innovation. Next slide, please. The interview panel, again, informed by the results from the phase 1 reviewers, will choose the 25 people or so that they deem to be the most pioneering. And for interviews in Bethesda or using online approaches that we've used for the past few years, given the pandemic. Next slide, please. And in the interview, Dr. Mask asks the interview panelists to consider the following. Is a principal investigator an individual with a track record of exceptional creativity? Does he or she really have the record of establishing new paradigms, challenging paradigms, overcoming hurdles in the past? Is the proposed project bold with the potential for broad impact? Does the proposal represent the extent of departure for the investigator and inherent risk sought in the Pioneer Award versus conventional NIH funding mechanisms? So again, this should really be a pivot for the investigator. It shouldn't be along the same trajectory, but it should really be a discontinuity in the trajectory of the PI's research. Next slide, please. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Ravi. And sorry we can't get James on.
but okay, but we'll manage. Okay.
Yeah, we will manage through this. So now we're going to begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. We've broken down the questions by topic areas. So like this first one is eligibility. But as you think of questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we will get to them. It may take us a while as we move from topic area to topic area. All right, so first up, talking about eligibility and a question we get very often. What is meant by pioneering, Robbie?
Pioneering, that's a subjective term well, sometimes I say, you know it when you see it to reference Potter Stewart, who was a justice on the Supreme Court talking about another matter. But pioneering is something that really, again, is think of the pioneer, somebody who's blazing new trails, going in new directions. It shouldn't be pushing along well-trodden paths, but somebody who's going after a different area of science, maybe, or bringing a very different perspective to bear on long-standing biomedical challenges, or maybe he or she sees an emerging opportunity and says, "Oh well, I can bring this to bear on this problem, and the impact could be huge."
Great, thank you. Let's see. Is it possible to hold an R35 grant from NIGMS and the DP1 at the same time?
It is not, because they both require 51% research effort. Okay, the two are incompatible because of the research effort required.
In terms of new research direction, does the proposal need to be in a completely different topic or field? What if a neuroscientist proposes to study immunology or neuroimmune interface?
Yeah. So we encourage people to go after or pursue new directions in research, but he or she should still have the skills to pursue that line of research. So it's rare that somebody proposes something far afield, going from quantum electrodynamics into studying the T cell receptor or something. But so it should be. But the example that's given, going from neuroscience, trying to bridge the gap between neuroscience and immunology, that'd be great to bring different fields together.
Okay, great. Let's see. I guess this is kind of it. Historically, how many applications are you receive?
Can't go into details by year, but typically, we see between 150 to 250 applications a year. The related question is, what is the success rate? So the success rate is usually about 4 to 5%. So it's quite competitive, but it is 0% if you don't apply.
Very true. Are current KO1 awardees eligible?
Yes, they are eligible, they're, but there are issues about being able to subsume the K award effort into the Pioneer Award, but those sort of details would need to be worked out. As long the K, one problem though is that the K award is a mentored research award, whereas a Pioneer Award you're all on your own. It's very much an independent research project that you're proposing, and you're one who's really pushing the field forward in a major way. So coming off a K award or pursuing a Pioneer Award directly after that, would need to provide a very compelling application.
Okay, and must the applicant have a PhD or is a MS acceptable?
An MS is acceptable. There's no requirement for a PhD.
It seems that the majority of award recipients are at a later stage of their career. Do you recommend new investigators or junior faculty submit to this call, or should they wait until later?
Yeah, so it really is open to people at all career stages, and we do encourage, if you think that you have a sufficiently bold idea that scales to the Pioneer Award, then you might consider submitting an application. But if you, and regarding that point, we try to instruct the reviewers to normalize the levels of innovation or track record that they expect based on the career stage of the applicant. We call it innovation density. So, for example, somebody who is just starting out, the expectation would be lower for him or her in terms of accomplishments than a person who's much more senior. But that being said, there are other opportunities for early stage investigators, such as the New Innovator Award. It's very much in spirit aligned with the Pioneer Award. The success rate is higher, 8 to 10%, and the expectations are also accordingly different for what's being proposed and the level of accomplishment.
Great, thank you. Let's see. How far afield are the funded investigators' study ideas from their established program of research?
Yeah, again, it's rare for somebody to go really very far afield, but because they need to have the skills or the technical skills to pursue what they're proposing. So, but it should, the major consideration here is whether it does represent a departure. Is this something, for example, is this something that your colleagues would be surprised that you would propose? Like, you're going from this field, but you're submitting a proposal in this topic, then if your colleagues go, oh wow, that's really cool. I didn't know you were into that. And that would be the kind of expectation that you would have. Or it would be not the type of project that you would propose as a competing continuation, a type 2 R01 award, for example. It should be something that's different. And again, it's a subjective interpretation of what's different.
Great, thank you. How many awards are made out of the 25 interviewees, and are resubmissions allowed?
Typically, we make between 7 and 10 awards, or maybe sometimes a few more awards each year. And yes, you're not allowed to submit a resubmission technically. You're allowed to submit another application. All applications are considered new submissions. So there's no A1 application, for example, for a Pioneer Award. They're all A0 applications, all first time. They're all new applications. So if you do submit an application again, it should not reference a previous submission or previous review. If you do, then that's grounds for administrative withdrawal of the application. So please don't mention any previous submission or review. And it's quite common for people to submit multiple times before being interviewed and being chosen eventually for the award.
Great, and what type of publication track record is advised for applicants?
Yeah, so we encourage the reviewers not to count publications or look at impact factors and such, but focus on what sort of publications they've had in terms of what impact have they had. Have they really on the field, or whether or not they are in different sort of areas of scientific endeavor. It's not about the quantity, but more about the quality of the publications.
Okay, and there's a question.
So there's no set standards for publication record.
Great. There's a question about gender balance. What is the gender balance among previous awardees?
Of course, that we are very interested in making sure that there's no bias for or against particular groups in the review process, and we do monitor such things carefully, although we can't make funding decisions based on gender, for example. We do monitor the results, and over the years, the gender balance and the awardees reflects the gender balance in the application pool. So there's no overall. There's a slight increase in the percentage of women that are awarded, but there's no bias against women, for example, in the review process.
Great. Is the current funding level considered for the PI? Like, is there a cap on current directs, like NIGMS policy?
There's no cap, but if you do have a lot of funding, then you need to provide a compelling argument of or compelling plan of how you would adjust your current funding so that you could really devote 51% research effort toward the Pioneer Award project. You can't, saying that, for example, that you transfer one of your many R01s or a few of your many R01s to people in your lab, that's really not a compelling way to go about things, because then you're still overseeing it in a sense.
Okay, and there's a question, see, could someone submit the same pioneering idea to the DP1 and the DP2, which is the New Innovator Award?
No, they
Up,
have to be, sorry, good.
yeah, said only one could be held, but wondering about possibility of submitting both.
No, they cannot, you cannot submit applications that substantially overlap that are pending or in review at the same time. So people have submitted simultaneously to the New Innovator and Pioneer Award initiatives, but they propose different ideas.
And are smaller institutions or institutions that are not research intensive competitive for the Pioneer Award?
They certainly can be. We do encourage applications from the full spectrum of institutions in the nation. If you convince the reviewers that you have the infrastructure necessary and to go about conducting the research, then that's totally fine.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic area, which is on application and submission. And we've had quite a few questions about example applications that people could review.
There are, and I think Becky, you can answer this better than I can. There are sample
Uh,
applications.
yeah. Yeah, check out our website. We do have a lot of resources available. We have an application and award guide there that walks you through the process, but it also includes example applications, so you can look through them. And we are working on getting some more examples and some more recent examples up there as well. So please be patient, but there are examples there. Okay. Um, what is the purpose of designating the two areas of science, and how do I choose between them?
The purpose is to help in the review process primarily, to assist Dr. Mack in assigning reviewers, because in the first phase, 2 of the electronic reviewers will have same topic designations as those of the application, and the third reviewer will have expertise that's outside those two areas that's designated by the application. So it's only helped in the review and the reviewer assignment process.
And there's a question about how many applications are typically received, which we talked about, and how many for each science area. I don't think we have that information, but
Yeah, we don't, but yeah, we don't have that information publicly available, but we have done analyses and you know, but there doesn't seem to be much of a bias based on the area.
yes. Could you talk more about the balance between not enough and too much preliminary data?
Yeah, so no data required, and we have had certainly applications with no data at all that have resulted in an award. Most people provide some data, again, to give that glimmer of hope that maybe this could actually work. But if you provide data as definitely at the level of a R01, then application would probably not fare well in review, because if everything looks eminently feasible, then the reviewers probably will say, hey, everything looks like it's going to work based on the data. This is better suited for an R01 than for Pioneer Award. So it's okay to give some tantalizing bits of data, but if you provide data that are so strong that what you propose really will work, then that may not be a good idea for this program. It may be counterproductive.
Excellent. And is evidence of institutional support necessary for the DP1 application?
No, the, the the award, it goes to the institution, not to the principal investigator. But that's one issue. But the applicants have one page to describe the environment and the resources available. It's the institution that submits the application on behalf of the PI. And so that means that implicitly that the institution would be able to support the applicant in terms of providing independent lab space and so forth to the individual.
Great. Does one have to include also the other support page showing how it would change if the DP1 were awarded? I guess,
No,
yeah.
yeah. So in the other, they would have, that would be in the 5-page essay. They would need to describe how they would adjust their current support to accommodate the Pioneer Award.
While the focus of the DP1 is on the investigator, HRHR research might require collaboration across disciplines. What is the expected way for investigators to demonstrate access to cross-disciplinary expertise to conduct rigorous research in the essay?
Trish, I mean, do you want to take that? I've been on the space. Or I'm glad to.
Yeah, so Trish, if you're there, what's a way investigators can demonstrate cross-disciplinary expertise uh, in the essay?
I'm sorry. Maybe Trish isn't available right now, but so the best way is that you can mention the collaborators in the essay. Again, they cannot provide letters of support. They cannot provide bio sketches. It's fine for people to Pioneer Award applicants to describe these collaborators in the essay. You can name them and their institutions and describe how they would contribute to the project. But it should be clear to the reviewers that this is really your project. This is not a team science project. They're providing complementary expertise. This is your scientific vision that's being followed. This is your scientific agenda that's being pursued.
Let's see. Given the need to be innovative but still have skills and knowledge, etc., it seems like successful proposals would bridge areas that have not previously been connected. Does that sound about right?
That sounds like one good way to think about it, yes. Connecting new areas, making connections that people haven't made before.
Great. And do pre-existing publications on research topics preclude consideration of the topic for DP1, even if they are few and perhaps basic?
It all depends again. So if you have a substantial publication record in the topic of what you're proposing, the idea, then that's not necessarily a good thing. It's okay to have maybe 1 or 2 preliminary publications in what you're proposing, but nothing extensive. It should really be something that's new to you, that a new idea that you're pursuing. and again, topic can be very broad term. So, but if it's very relevant to what you're proposing and to the deliverables that you hope to have by the end of the project period, then having many publications that would support that would not be a good thing.
Should the essay be telling a story or a scientific review paper or any other kind?
Shouldn't be, no, this is where some people are getting up. Although we use the term essay, it really shouldn't be florid in its prose. It should be really very crisp in the language that's being used. The reviewers need to understand clearly what it is you're proposing and why you're proposing. It should be concrete. This is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to do it. Overall, this is how I'm going to go about doing it. And if I do it, this is why it's really important. And that's, you should be, successful applicants have used different approaches. But whatever approach you use, just keep the reviewer in mind. It should be easy for him or her to apprehend what you're doing and why it's cool.
Great. There's also a question about how persistent people should be in submitting and resubmitting to Pioneer and even the DP2. Should an investigator simply keep trying year to year, given there's a valid research idea?
Yeah, if you're passionate about it, then you should really consider. Of course, if you can refine your ideas from year to year and maybe take into consideration the reviewer critiques that you receive. But if you're passionate about it, then there's really no reason not to pursue it if you do believe in your idea. And people have submitted quite a few years and ultimately 3, 4, 5 years and ultimately receive the award, or they don't submit every year, but every now and then they have an idea and they submit an application and ultimately they get the award. The DP2, similar, except that you have to worry about the being an early stage career, so that 10-year window will end. So you have to make sure that you're still an early stage investigator when you apply.
Great. And if you are planning on collaborating with experts in the field you are entering, should this be described in the essay or in the one-page environment statement?
That's typically done in the essay.
And you mentioned 51% research effort, not clinical or administrative. Does that mean if a PI has 80% research effort, the effort requirement would be 41%?
Correct.
All right.
Of the overall effort.
Yes, overall. Do research topics have to be completely new? Can it be partly what the PI has been doing and partly new?
So change in research direction, that's a subjective matter. So it shouldn't be what the investigator might be expected to do. Like, okay, this person has been working in the system and probably the next steps would be this. It shouldn't be a logical progression, and it should be something that's a bit of a surprise for the community if that person started pursuing research in that new area, in that different area. So, the prior research effort can help, and expertise can help build a launching pad, but the direction that he or she hopes to take off in would be different.
Great. How can an investigator applying for the grant for the first time show exceptional scientific creativity?
Depends on career stage. If the person is just starting out in his or her career, then typically as a graduate student postdoc, they will have had some research outputs that can be evaluated by the reviewers. We try to educate the reviewers into considering the career stage, to use the concept of innovation density in assessing the track record of innovation and accomplishment by the reviewer, by the PI. But if it's a more senior person, then the expectations will increase commensurately.
There are people asking about, oh, hold on, getting James. James also adds in, remember the testimonials of references to.
Yes, thank you, James.
Okay.
Yes, and so that's of course a great point. The letter writers, the reference letter writers, they will also weigh in on, well, they should be able to speak to the individual, his or her attributes in conducting innovative research, and maybe also discuss a bit about the proposal and why it might be so innovative and potentially impactful. So that's another source of information apart from publication record.
There's a question about ESI status. So what if the PI will apply as an ESI, but the ESI status expires by the time the proposal is reviewed? So I guess it's also how is ESI status considered with the Pioneer as well?
ESI status is not formally considered for the Pioneer Award program. That's the New Innovator Award program, not the Pioneer Award.
Yes, and James adds in that it's not relevant here. Another question, this might be a bit too specific. Is it appropriate to propose generating novel research tools like conditional knockout mice as part of the DP1 strategy, or would that count against feasibility?
I'm not sure.
James says surely. So, um, it is so yes, you can propose generating novel research tools.
Yeah, that's one of the deliverables, but sure. Yeah, people do propose developing new technologies that address important biological problems.
All right, another comment. Let's see. Looking at prior recipients of the Pioneer Award, they seem to be mainly biomedical research. Are behavioral research projects a new focus, or is there a reason why there are few or no behavioral research projects?
We don't get as many applications in the behavioral or social science areas. So we are trying to encourage applications in those areas, but but because we don't get as many applications, we don't make as many awards. So again, if you don't see an award in your particular area of science, that should not be a disincentive for you from applying. We really do want to support all the science areas within the broad mission of NIH. And frankly, there's been some feedback too, because people look at what's been funded before and then they say, well, my area is not there, I'm not going to get it, and say they don't apply. We want to break that feedback cycle.
Exactly, yes. Um, there is a question like, well, are there certain areas that are encouraged, or I guess maybe more encouraged?
Well, we can take a look. We do support areas in all topic. We do support topics that are relevant to the broad mission of NIH. But for example, you may notice that behavioral social science research we have not supported as much, again, because we haven't received as many applications in that area. So we are trying to diversify the scientific portfolio. It's one of our programmatic priorities.
All right. In the interest of time, let's move on. Budget, there's not much, but maybe we can squeeze this in. There is a question. Are investigators from outside the US allowed to be part of the application with the US investigator?
Yes.
foreign components are allowed, so you can use your funds to pay for those collaborators and contractors. Um,
The
um,
PI, of course, must be at a U.S. domestic institution, but foreign collaborations are allowed.
I think that's really the only budget question that I've seen. So let's go ahead and move on then to areas that people are more interested in. We've had a lot of questions about letters of reference. All right. What makes for good letters for a DP1 application? Writers from the same institution or other institutions within the US or without the US, outside the US?
Yeah, the letter writer should be able to speak to the qualities of the investigator. Again, the track record of pursuing and accomplishing innovative science, and should be able to the various qualities that are necessary. For example, bringing together different expertise, but leading the project, being being bold enough to challenge paradigms, and whether he or she has done that or established new paradigms, whether the individual has been able to overcome hurdles using very different perspectives previously or new approaches, and may also wish to speak something about what's being proposed, whether in the letter writer's estimation it really is so innovative and potentially impactful, and why. It should probably not come from someone who is invested in the outcome. For example, probably should not be from a collaborator, probably should not be your chair or dean, somebody who has some sort of investment in the outcome and therefore might provide some sort of skewed language
Yes.
out of
Uh,
self-interest.
there's another question along this same vein. Should it be a previous and current mentor? Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fine as long as they're not collaborators in the proposed research.
Let's see. Good. Are international researchers allowed to provide letters of reference?
Yes.
Um, question. Uh, all right. I think those are questions on letters of reference. Kind of similar. There's a question about whether or not DP2s require letters of reference. They do not,
I do not.
but for the webinar tomorrow.
Yep.
I guess here's one from a previous question. Does the other support document show the current distribution of effort by the PI, or
Yes.
how or what it would change if if a PI is awarded?
So the other support should show the current effort that's being expended toward those projects. But in the essay, there should be the discussion of how that would be altered if necessary to accommodate the Pioneer Award at 51% research effort. But in the other support, you don't, it's not necessary to provide that argument in the other support. That should be in the essay. That's where the reviewers will know to look for it.
And we actually had two more questions come in about reference letters. They're very similar. So should the letter writers be professors, or can they be from like a lower rank? And another question asking if we've looked at the status of the letter writers for successful applicants. Are they late career, Nobel laureates, National Academy of Science members?
It should be somebody who is respected, in the field, but doesn't need to be Nobel laureates. We really want to shy away from this being based on whom you know, and who can write letters for you. Whomever you choose or ask to write your letters of reference should be able to should know you and should be able to speak compellingly about your qualities and why you might be appropriate for the Pioneer Award program. So we try to shy away from the whom you know sort of game.
All right, I think those are it for this, but next is the review. We have quite a few for review, and James, if you want to continue IMing me, I can put your responses on. I will read out your responses, I should say. Our in-person interviews, I guess, well, are the interviews going to be in person or in person in Zoom? So Zoom or in person inter I don't know what CSR has decided for sure. James is typing. He's still typing. Yeah, so for the last couple years, they have been done over Zoom.
Right.
Uh, it's still to be determined, but very possibly in person. So we don't quite know yet. Another question about review. Historically, how many applications are there in phase one? I guess that's before the so Ravi talked about that before. We can't
Yeah.
give out numbers of applications. It can, yeah, the
Broadly,
success.
it's 150, 250. It depends on the year. The numbers fluctuate.
Um, do the scores from phase one count towards the overall priority score at the end of the phase two, the interview,
No,
or is the priority score determined entirely by the phase two interview panel?
entirely by the phase two interview panel. Sorry, James.
Gotta type faster, James. Okay, let's see. So those applicants who do not progress to the top 25, do they get feedback as you would from something like a standard R01?
I'll go ahead and answer. That's okay, James. Yes, they do get critiques from the male reviewers, from the technical reviewers, phase one reviewers.
Okay. Yes, and he adds that the summaries are released only after final interviews. So if you don't make that cutoff, you still have to wait till
Yeah.
the end. Um, sure. Maybe you understand this better. Will scores and critiques from step one before the interview be released to the applicant? Yes, we said that. What if an investigator does not have a track record of being a beacon of innovation and yet has a fantastically brilliant idea?
Is James typing?
He's typing, yeah.
Okay.
Um, he says make the case. The panels should be open. So go ahead and pitch it and see. All right. Another question about feedback. Since the focus of the review is on innovativeness and the PI, has the NIH considered blinded reviews in which the identity of the PI is not known to the reviewer?
If I
Robbie.
may, James, yeah, we are experimenting with or conducting a pilot of anonymized review with one of the other four initiatives in the HRHR program, the Transformative Research Awards. Of the four initiatives, that's the one that's the most project-based. The other three are more person-based awards. And so this upcoming year, will be the third year of the pilot so far. And if you're really interested, we'll discuss more about the pilot and the transformer during our webinar tomorrow for the Transformative Research Award Initiative.
All right. There's a question asking if there are data that shows whether successful applicants are first time, second time, third time, etc. applicants?
Yeah, so I don't recall the data, but
We've done that.
it's quite common for people to submit multiple times before getting the award.
Okay. Let's see.
I'm not sure if it's a what sort of distribution, if it's a binomial sort of distribution, but
Um, so let's see. Can the summary and project narrative be shared with Becky or other HRHR members for feedback before submission? Using the sample applications in NIH Reporter, the tone is different across projects. And they're hearing that Ravi about not wanting the pros to lose the reviewers, but balancing the Scientific American. So I guess, can you talk with, I guess, talk to somebody about your idea and get feedback?
typically they speak with me.
Yeah. Yes, please contact Ravi. Um, um, yes, so if you want to talk about the scope of the initiative and the award, you can reach out and schedule time with Ravi. Please email us at the pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov address, and we can set that up. Okay, given that most institutes' clinical trial requirements involve rigid predefined protocols and lack of broad exploration, as it is intrinsically underpowered, they are not compatible with novel exploratory developmental research. Why then do you require DP1 applicants meet institutional clinical trial requirements?
Well, they to to you can human subject research still must have very strict standards, regardless of whether it's supported as a high risk, high reward research program or not. Uh, it is still, but it is possible to support to pursue innovative research while still ensuring the safety of human subjects. I'm not sure I quite get the question. We do support clinical trial research in the HR program, or ways to conduct clinical research.
Yes. And we do ask that if you are going to submit a clinical trials application, you please go to our website and look up the most scientifically relevant NIH institute or center, and talk with the contacts listed on our website for information on making sure you're complying with their their policies and procedures for clinical trial research. That's because if an award is made, we are going to transfer your application to the most scientifically relevant NIH institute and center. We want to make sure you're compliant with them so that they will accept it. So that's another thing to consider. Um, uh, are potential applicants recommended or required to consult with Ravi about relevance and scope of the proposed research before applying?
Absolutely not. No. But I'm happy to talk with individuals, just hear about what you're thinking about, maybe providing some general feedback, low resolution feedback.
Yes, another question, I can answer this. Can a DP1 and DP2 proposal be submitted in the same cycle? Um, you can submit to the different funding opportunities, but you cannot submit the same research project or scope of the project. So you can't have overlapping submissions, even if they're going to different funding opportunities. They can't be in process at the same time. This is based on NIH policy. So this stands for even if you're submitting R01s. So if you have overlapping research aims, you're not going to be able to submit them at the same time. You need to wait for the summary statement to be released from one before you can submit again. But it is fine to submit to the DP1, DP2 if they're different ideas. All right. And we have someone being sneaky. Have the 2022 DP2 decisions been made yet? And have awardees been notified?
They are being made. Oh, go ahead.
This is actually a Trish question because this is the DP2s.
I'm here, so I can tell you that no decisions have not been finalized yet, and no, there has been no official announcement made yet. Will those who are not receiving the award be notified as well? No, I don't think we actually do that actively. So no news in this case would be bad news, I guess.
But at the very end, we do provide closure to those who don't receive the award, saying, "Oops, sorry, no, not this year."
Yes, but it wouldn't be,
Right,
not an announcement, certainly.
correct.
And we will have all the information about the new awardees on our website and, links to Reporter and all of that so that it can be, seen what were supported, what sort of science was supported this year.
Excellent. All right, and actually popping back to talking about clinical trial stuff. They were saying that we're missing the point about human subjects. Clinical trials require far more details than 5 pages allow.
Right. So if you're planning not even clinical trials, if you're planning human subjects research, then you still have to complete the human subjects component of the application. The expectation, and with clinical trials and human subjects in general, you are asked to provide details, but information, but fill them out as best as you can with your best estimates, and the reviewers are educated that these are your best estimates, that they might need to change depending on how the research progresses.
All right. Are there any last questions? I think we've answered some. Some I didn't answer. They're very specific, so I would ask you to please contact us at our email address. It's pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov. Then there's another question that's be answered easily in the funding opportunity, the scientific areas. Are there any others? All right, then we can close up and give Robbie's poor voice a rest.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Yes, so just this has been recorded, and I will be posting the recording as well as the slides used for the presentation on our website. That's go to commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer. They will be posted there. It will take us a week or so to get them up there just because we have to make them accessible and compliant with federal policy, but they will be made available to you. And once again, I encourage you to go to our website to look for that application help and those examples. And there's some good tools there for you. That's it. Then thank you, everyone. Thank you to Robbie for answering everything. And thank you all for attending.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
All right, recording.